Welcome to our November 18th version of our NaNoWriMo series here at Fayette Memorial Library. Today we have Beth Kander with us, who has an MFA in creative writing right here from Mississippi University for Women. She's also got a master's in social work from the University of Michigan and a liberal arts degree from Brandeis University, not very far from where I went to school. She has two new books out since you graduated, right? Original Sin and Born in Sin. This is the first two books of a three-part trilogy. The first came out in September 2018 from Owl House Books. And from the Clarion Ledger's review of Original Sin has one of the most creative settings in modern science fiction. Kander's novel puts a bold new twist on the classic Romeo and Juliet story. What a great quote, right? And then for the new quote, Born in Sin, which has just come out, very fresh. We're actually the part of the book tour.
It's true. Official stop.
Official stop on the official book tour. Recommended for all dystopian fiction lovers from Library Journal. So that's an early review. Of course, the real reviews haven't had time to come out yet. Not that that's not a real review, because of course Library Journal is totally a real review. Sin and Salvation is the third installment, which will be coming out next fall. Excellent. I was surprised to learn that you also have written a children's book. Yeah. Glebbery Gray, is that right?
That's true. I've written several, but I've only had one that's been published.
Oh, okay.
So that's the one you can
right. Excellent point. A Night Eating Beast, which is a counting book.
It is, and I will say I have a 3-year-old, and they do this mystery reader program at her school where you send in clues, and the class has to guess whose parent is coming in to read. And I came in and read this children's picture book about a night-eating beast that does eat most of the other characters over the course of the book. And there were a couple of kids and teachers who were like, so I might have made up a little ending where the beast burps them all back up at the end. That's not in the print edition, but went over really well in the 3-year-old preschool class.
I love it. Well, feel free to do that today if you need to.
Thank you. I'll totally rewrite all of the endings of everything we're going to talk about on the spot.
I actually met Beth as a playwright. We were just talking about this 10 years ago when she won Mississippi Theater Association Playwriting Award for her play, See Jane Quit, which was delightful.
Which you directed.
You are right. You are right. 10 years is a long time.
It's a long time.
10 years is a long time. Wow. Yes, my theater experience is just gone from my mind. You've blown my mind now. We are at the end of our program now.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Great. Thank you for coming. Now I remember I found the picture, which is on Facebook of us from 10 years ago.
It's worth Facebook stalking us.
It is.
This picture.
It is. It's on the library's Facebook.
It's on Facebook, it's on Twitter, and it's on Instagram.
Oh no.
On it.
Oh no. So anyway, all that to say, I know Beth as a playwright, and she has been having her plays produced since she graduated, and you just came back from
Creed, Colorado, Creed Repertory Theater, Equity Theater there premiered my play, Hazardous Materials.
Wonderful. It's so exciting what you've been doing. So anyway, we're so excited to have Beth here. And with us to welcome Beth is Vic Jones, and Vic is a public service library associate here at the library. She has a BA and master's in history. Her bachelor's is from Nova Southeastern, her master's from University of North Florida. I should have this memorized by now, but I still have to look at the notes. And it is a lot of places. And then she's getting her master's in library science, library and information science from University of Southern Mississippi, so many of those, in archives and special collections. So she's here today as our moderator and interviewer, and we'll be taking questions from the audience. We'll also be taking questions from people who have joined us on Zoom. you can hashtag us, or you can go ahead and put in your questions through the Zoom app. So let's do it. Beth is going to read a little bit for us. She's also got some new material, fresh material. Beth is participating in a novel way with, I know, right?
Look what you did.
With
You did there.
National Novel Writing Month. She's doing it with revisions instead of with original writing. And so she's logging pages of revisions. And so she's going to read a little bit from her new work as well as from Born in Sin.
Yeah.
Or whatever you want to read. You just go for it. Do it. Read some stuff. Get started.
All right. I'm going to read a little bit from Original Sin. We'll start there. See how we're feeling about the reading. I'll sort of take the temperature in the room. Zoom, feel free to weigh in. And yeah, then I'll tell you how I'm cheating with NaNoWriMo this year and maybe preview a little bit of what I'm working on for that. So Original Sin sort of throws you into the beginning of this dystopian world where there's really only two categories of people anymore. The haves, who really have everything and have augmented with technology, and they're known as synthetic citizens or sins, and the originals, the humans who did not have the means or interest in joining with the machines. So that's the play of Original Sin, are these two kinds of people. But some of the story is told little bits and pieces in flashback in the first book. So I'm going to share a little bit of one of those excerpts about one of the leaders of the synthetic movement, Felix Hess, in his younger days. Though good-looking, with sharp, striking features and dark-lashed eyes, Felix Hess had no social aptitude, which was fine, since he also had zero social interest. He didn't want to date. He didn't have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Instead, he had a rival. Her name was Claudia. Claudia Lee was young. She finished high school at 15, spent 2 years studying in a private biogenetic lab in Beijing, and was still only 17 when she enrolled at Stanford. At 5 feet tall, she was easy to overlook in a crowd, but the girl was impossible to miss in the classroom. Her hand was perpetually aloft, her papers often distributed as examples. In class rankings, she was always either first or second, directly below or directly above Felix. "You're Felix Hess," Claudia said, finding him as he strode across the quad en route from organic chemistry to biolab. She fell in step with him and cracked open a Red Bull. "I am," he said, not slowing his pace. "I'm Claudia Lee. Sometimes you're at the top of the dean's list, and sometimes it's me. Just thought you should know, I like being on top." The innuendo flew right past him. Don't we all? She smirked, assuming a returned flirtation that wasn't actually there. "Well, I'm graduating first in our class, just so you know. But if you're interested in a consolation prize, good luck with that," Hess said, and took advantage of his longer legs to outpace her, not hearing anything after first in our class. He couldn't stay ahead of her for long, though. A few minutes after he reached his lab, the same chirping voice trilled in his ear. "Aw, are you in this section? Looks like I'm your TA. Want a cookie?" He locked eyes with Claudia Lee, who held a tray of fresh baked goods, her own first day of class tradition, give treats to the students before making them crumble like cookies. "But you're an undergrad," Hess protested. "I know," she grinned, marveling at herself. Felix went straight to the registrar to switch lab sections. But this, too, was insufficient in ridding himself of Claudia. She was in his phys chem class the next day, but at least she wasn't teaching it. When she saw him, she dropped her book bag in the seat beside him. "Future overlords should stick together," she said. "So, what's your end game?" "What?" "How are you going to save, end, or take over the world?" He almost didn't want to tell her. He felt certain if he did, she might want to take it from him. Or worse, share it with him. But his ego got the better of him, and on the off chance he might be mentioning something she didn't know much about, he said, "Cyberganics." "Figures," she said, neither surprised nor impressed. "I'm AI all the way." Hess barely managed to not roll his eyes. Artificial intelligence was an interesting thought experiment, but ultimately pointless. He didn't believe robots would overthrow their inventors or anything stupid like that. He just didn't think the best use of technology was something separated from man. Reinventing wheels didn't interest him. Building upon what already existed was a smarter tactic. Why AI, he asked, only half interested in her reply. I like playing God, she said. It's a good game, he allowed. So that's a little original sin.
Right.
Thank you. So Born in Sin, the second book in the series, actually is almost all flashbacks. Almost every story, almost every chapter is a standalone story answering the question of how did we get here? How did we wind up in this dystopian world? Which was a lot of fun to write, to think about how can I be building the larger narrative while writing these smaller stories. Plus, book one totally ends on a cliffhanger, and apparently I wanted to really anger some readers by, instead of neatly wrapping up the cliffhanger in the second book, like dragging them through all of this history and then being like, come back for book three. So that's what you will find in Born in Sin. And actually you could start with the second book and have only minor risk of spoilers, because so much of it is sort of precursor to what happens in the first book. So rather than read from that, do you want me to talk about what I'm doing with NaNoWriMo? And
Yes,
definitely.
You got
Okay, great.
You got
So I've done NaNoWriMo the traditional way several times, which is you're supposed to start from scratch, write a new project, generate 50,000 words over the course of November for National Novel Writing Month. It took me, by the way, a long time to be able to say NaNoWriMo and have it be the correct syllables for National Novel Writing Month, so I'm very proud of that skill now. But this year I'm doing it a little differently because I'm in a program called Pitch Wars, which I applied to and got into, and I'm working with this established author to further my current manuscript, which is a sort of modern feminist reclamation of Jewish folklore around some of the ghosty, gothic-y aspects.
Nice.
So 13 Jericho Lane is the project that I'm currently in revision mode on, and how I'm using NaNoWriMo is, instead of generating new pages, as Amanda said, I'm sort of updating what the word count I get through and editing each day as I get these very intense revision notes that sometimes mean completely rewriting or dropping chapters and trying something again, from my mentor, Sam Taylor, who's just been great with the feedback. Having someone who will give that critical eye to your book and say, I think you're a really good writer, this chapter's terrible and you need to take it out and redo it, is really what you need. I mean, you need someone that you trust who will help you push yourself to get your first or second or third draft to where you want it to be, since it's usually not there quickly. And we can talk more about that later if we want to talk NaNoWriMo stuff and what it can and can't do for you. So here's a little bit from the beginning of 13 Jericho Lane. Prologue. The flowers were the first affront. They arrived on the doorstep in the still gray morning, brought by some sort of delivery service. They were daffodils, garish yellow, cheap, and duck-like. They were crowded into a painted vase, overly decadent for such a peasant bouquet. The delivery man did not knock or wait to see if anyone was home. He simply set the ugly arrangement on our porch and left. This made us wary, because the flowers certainly were not for us. Chapter 1. My mother and I stared at the stupid flowers like they might bite us. I was the one who finally tugged the small eggshell white envelope free of its forked holder. I already knew who must have sent the floral arrangement, and confirmed my hunch as I read the message scrawled in a stranger's handwriting. Good luck with the move. Thinking of you both. Dad/David. Reading the words my father paid someone else to write, my chest tightened. The note and the flowers were completely contrived, implying that somehow my mother and I moving into this creepy old house while my father stayed in our condo in Albany Park was some happy agreement we collectively decided upon, as if one day we were all sitting around the breakfast table and instead of suggesting a family vacation, hey, who's up for Disney? We instead casually floated the notion of ending our family as we know it. Hey, who's up for a divorce? Technically, my parents weren't divorced. They were just separated. They just needed some time. Just. Like, it's no big deal when two people who have been together for almost 20 years are suddenly not. It was, of course, my mother who told me that they were splitting up. She was usually the one in charge of delivering bad news, even if it wasn't really her choice to always be the messenger. I came home from the final day of my freshman year of high school, and my mother was waiting with a plate of cookies and a glass of milk, like she did back when I was in the 2nd grade. But this time the cookies weren't warm and homemade. They were encased in the bright yellow packaging my mother usually wailed was killing the planet. A small orange $2.19 price tag peeling slightly from the edge. Your father and I are separating. She said it calmly, evenly, like she'd been practicing all afternoon. That's when she ripped open one of the sleeves of chocolate chunk cookies, handing me one and helping herself to one too, despite her aversion to heavily processed foods. Dad was staying in the apartment in the city, my mother told me, while we got to have what she tried to frame as the real adventure. Apparently, Aunt Sarah had found us a whole house to lease for the summer, a big place an hour outside the city, in a quaint little town with a good liberal arts college where my mother could pick up some summer adjunct work and I could really stretch my legs. Stretch my legs? I asked, as my breathing became irregular. She handed me another cookie and told me to take a deep breath. Do you still love him? I asked, not touching the first or the second cookie. That's when my father walked in, and the look on his face told me that he hadn't expected us to be there. I wasn't expecting him either. Usually he worked late, not getting home until after 7. He was carrying several bags of takeout, which he held up with a weak smile. Surprise, he said, I got Thai. And then, finally reading the room and realizing what he'd walked into. Oh. There was a long, uncomfortable silence, like someone hit the pause button on our awkward family scene. Dark-curled mother and daughter, sitting at the table, both on the verge of tears, bearded, balding father, clutching 2 white plastic bags with red letters reading, thank you, over and over, just standing there. We said we'd both be here when Ari got home, my mother finally said, quiet. Oh, that's when I realized that they were supposed to drop the bomb together, but he was late, as always. To be fair, he probably had no idea what time I got home from school. Why would he remember that I got home an hour earlier now that I was in high school as opposed to junior high? The trains were running slow. I texted you. You could have told me that, but you didn't bother to answer. My mother cut him off. You were supposed to be here an hour ago. So you just told her without me? My mother said nothing. That's a little lighthearted there.
Just a little lighthearted fair. So where did that come from, this new work? You've written a draft of it? Was it a NaNoWriMo draft?
So it was not a NaNoWriMo draft. I wrote this one over the course of the last year. I love ghost stories, and I can't remember where I first stumbled across it, but I at some point picked up some book on sort of Jewish folklore and demonology, and I'd heard of, the Golem and Dybbuk's, right. But I'd never heard of Ibur, which are a kind of ghost that's in Jewish tradition, but they're actually the sort of ghosts that we often picture in sad and gothic ghost stories that aren't malevolent, right. But have a task they need to complete before they can pass on, that have to connect with some human who will be sympathetic to their plight. And there's something that just really resonated with me about that idea. And I'm Jewish, and I'd never really written sort of any folklore, ghost, gothic type story, even though I devour them. I read them all the time. I love those sorts of shows. And so I thought, I kind of want to play with this and see where it goes. And I've also long been fascinated ever since, and I was pretty young when I heard that hysteria and hysterectomy are from the same root, and that in fact only women could be diagnosed with hysteria, and it was a tool to throw unruly women into asylums for many years. So without spoilering too much, I will say that the ghosts in need of assistance have some connection to that story too. And this was the first way that I really found it was kind of a new angle to look at that. That's not the trapped in an asylum type story, but how could we lift up those voices and sort of turn some of the ghost story tropes on their head, and instead making them about making women victims. This is very much a ghost story that is lifting up women's stories, which kind of kept me excited the whole time I was writing it. So that's a little bit of where it came from.
That's very exciting. Have you read A Woman Warrior?
No.
I'll
add it to my list.
Yes.
I have no notebook in front of me, which is really weird. But
Lots of
it's
great
on
ghosts.
Zoom, right?
Yes.
I can
remember
download
it
it
from
later.
Zoom.
Just rewatch the whole thing.
I'll rewatch the whole
Right.
interview.
Great
Love.
ghosts. And yes. Lifting up women's stories. Yes. Okay.
Great.
Oh yeah, no. Really
Book
good.
recs, everything.
That wasn't the plan. That wasn't.
I'll always take them.
Yeah. Me too.
I know we're only about halfway through NaNoWriMo, but just in the past 18 days, what does that revision process look like for you?
Oh, it's a great question. So I've been in the privileged position of being sent really explicit feedback about what I need to investigate and change and overhaul, as I write. And what I've loved about NaNoWriMo in the past, I found has still applied when I've been interacting in this different way, that there's all this community around it. And I love seeing all of the W social media around the W writes, because even though I don't necessarily need the prompts, it's just this reminder that there's other people really rolling up their sleeves and doing the work. And my task right now is really to push through and get through these revisions. And I have very firm deadlines. So yeah, it's been really prescriptive what I need to address, and it's been really inspiring to just sort of feel that community of other people working and creating and knowing that I get to plug into that for this really concentrated month.
So you've been logging your pages
And then, yes.
on the national site. So
Mhm.
you've joined that. Have you gotten much out of the national group?
And less so this year, although one of the things that I do love are the sort of you can do it emails that they send out from
Right.
really famous authors. And I do still read those about what they do when they hit a wall, or why it's important to sort of take a break and read in the middle of your writing and remind yourself what you're trying to get to. So I have still been opening those emails. Right. I haven't gone to any meetups this year, although I do love that if you participate in NaNoWriMo and list where you live, and I know there's been a lot of stuff going on campus, you can figure out who else locally is writing and have that accountability buddy. If you show up somewhere and know, okay, we're committing 3 hours at the coffee shop or at the library to push through this right now. I've done that in the past too, which has been really fun.
No, that's great. That's great.
So you mentioned earlier that your previously working in NaNoWriMo has kind of really helped you in like this revision process of NaNoWriMo. Can you kind of talk about some of the things you've done before and how it's kind of fed into this as well?
Yeah. So the very first time that I did NaNoWriMo, I was so excited that it was a thing. I was like, what? So, there's daily I'm a list maker, so the fact that there was like, this is where you should be at with your word count by now, and here's where you should sort of plan your arc over the course to be, and we'll chart your words. Like, this is kind of a list maker writer's dream. And I started from scratch, followed all of the rules, as they say. Like, I came up with an idea day one of NaNoWriMo and just sort of went after it and cranked out 50,000 pages of this book and was like, this is amazing. It's going to get published right away. That's not really how it works. And in fact, my advice to anyone who's doing NaNoWriMo, and it's amazing, if you crank out 50,000 words, whether that means a full first draft or 50,000 words towards a first draft, when December 1 comes, just like shut that document for a while. Don't even look at it. And then when you reopen it, and I really didn't learn this until year 2, but it makes such a huge difference, read just the first page out loud. And you will spot typos, realize, oh, that didn't like quite hook even me in that very first line the way that I thought that it would. Or, ooh, that line's really good. I want to find more moments like that. But you'll realize, I need to spend more time with this now before it's really ready to share with someone else. Because I think what NaNoWriMo is great for is lighting a fire, pushing you forward, getting some real momentum. And then I think the entire rest of the year, and that's how I really have thought about it ever since whenever I do a NaNoWriMo project, is November is for just shut up the editor in your head and just write. Just get it out there. Just push, 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 go, 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 go. And then December through August, at least, is about revise, take your time, read pages aloud, get someone who you love and trust and who you will still love when they tell you, yeah, this needs work, because you trust them to tell you that. And then you could do the NaNoWriMo hack that I'm doing this year, and the next November, dive back into that same project, but use it to do your revision pages. Or maybe you'll have done that over the course of the year and you're ready to jump into something else. But I do think that it's unrealistic to say you will write a novel worth immediately sharing over the course of NaNoWriMo. But I think it's absolutely true that you can write something that you love and feel passionately about enough that it will sustain your interest to get it to where it actually needs to be before you share it with readers over the course of NaNoWriMo. And that's a gift.
Oh, yeah. We've been really excited to structure something just to stimulate people of any kind of writing, even if it's not 50,000 words, even if it's, a nonfiction article that they're writing for publication. So yes, whatever you can do. And then I like the idea of pushing through no matter what and letting it sit for a little while so that your brain can get out of that. Yes.
Yeah, and it's hard to see it, like how we're all terrible proofreaders for ourselves, even if we're great proofreaders for other people. Like you fill in all of the holes plot-wise and word in the middle of a sentence-wise and anything that might be missing.
Right.
And you can see it better if you sort of step away, get some distance, do some other reading and writing, catch up on the shows that you're behind on because you were so good and didn't even turn on Hulu for the course of NaNoWriMo. Not sure if I'm up to date on The Good Place. But other than that, someone asked me, like, how do you make time for writing?
Yeah.
Because I have a day job, I have playwriting deadlines, I have this novel stuff and pitch wars, and I have a 3-year-old. And the honest truth is, like, you have time if you want to make time. It's just that you have to give up some of your downtime. And so especially for November, when I find myself like, oh, I just want to sit on the couch, turn on Netflix and veg, I can do that, but that'll be giving up my 2.5 hours of writing time that night. Or I can say, it'll keep, I'm going to write tonight. And that's the other nice thing about sort of the finite NaNoWriMo structure is you don't have to say forever I'm giving up my recreational, just relaxing time. And in fact, it's great to then dive in and binge your favorite show in December when you're trying to step away. But that's definitely one of my strategies is like, okay, when it's laundry's in the laundry, kids gone to bed, work stuff is done for the day, instead of turning on this screen, I'm going to turn on this screen. And that's my evening.
Do you have a different time of day that you do revisions versus writing?
Oh, interesting question. Nope.
Everything at night.
Mostly because I don't have the luxury.
Right.
Maybe if I had, when writing is all that I do, putting it out there, whoever's listening, then maybe I would sort of be able to find that rhythm. But my writing time is so precious that right now, whatever I have to do next, whether it's writing or revising, is what I'm going to do the next time I have time to write. And I also just don't have as much staring at the blank screen as I used to have at other seasons in my life, because I don't really have that luxury. So in some ways that's really great because it means even if it's total crud that I'm going to have to go back to and fix later,
right.
Anytime I sit down in front of the keyboard, I'm going to write something.
Tell us about the blank screen. What do you do? So writer's block, what do you do? What have you done now before? Do you believe in it?
Good question.
Right.
Yes and no. I believe in writer's block for a given project. I believe that you can totally like hit a wall and just not know how to move forward in this one thing that you're working on. But I do not believe in writer's block writ large, that like you are now a writer who cannot write. You are completely blocked and there is just no writing that you can do. That might be because as a playwright and author, and my headspace is very different when I'm writing one versus the other. Like if I run into a wall with my novel, I always have a script that I can call up and pick at, and that will be my writing for the day to still like get in some writing and sort of open myself up. So that's my primary response to writer's block is I'll say, it's just for this. I'm not blocked as a writer. I am blocked on Sin and Salvation. So I'm going to go work on hazardous materials for a little while. And then when I hit a snag there, or when the back of my brain unlocks and I'm able to think about Sin and Salvation again, then I'll come back over here. But yeah, my other advice when you get writer's block on any sort of project is to just read again. One of my favorite books on writing is Stephen King's On Writing, which is fabulous. If you haven't read it, it's just a great and very readable craft novel by someone who knows a thing or two about writing books that people read. And Stephen King has this really strong philosophy that is pretty much an indictment that if you are not a voracious reader, you don't deserve to be a writer. Why should someone read you if you're not reading people? And so I always find that putting aside my work and jumping back into whatever I'm reading or should be reading is another great way to unlock it, because either I'm reading great stuff, which makes me go, oh, I want to do this. I want to be this good. And that means putting in the effort. That means doing the work. Or if I'm reading something that's awful, I'm like, well, I can do better than that. If that got published, I can get published. So win-win.
Do you have any like go-to works that you like to read when you're in that kind of headspace?
Ooh, good question. I'm not a huge go back and read again. The two books that I have come back to, well, all right, two books in a series that I've read for sure more than once. Stephen King's On Writing, A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving, which is just such brilliant bringing together of different pieces, which is what I'm always trying to do in writing, that I feel like I learn something every time I go back and read that book. And Harry Potter, straight up, I have read multiple times. I also highly recommend the Jim Dale audiobook, and hearing all of the characters in the way that he brings them to life. But that's another example, I think, not only of good storytelling and world building that clearly has had an impact on readers, but she gets better. Like really, if you go back and read the first book of Harry Potter, I actually find it very encouraging that writing, like storytelling wise, it's good. Writing wise, it's not as good as book 7. You get to sort of see the world's most famous living writer get better. And that's really what I got out of my second read of the series, is not just revisiting the story, but seeing like, oh, we're all always getting better as writers. Even my buddy JK.
What do you think about the market, the exploding market for young adult books, and how it's affected you as an author or readers in general?
I mean, I think it's mostly great. Anytime that something causes an explosion in literature, I'm loath to say that that's not awesome. It does, I think, push a lot of works into being YA that might not otherwise be. Original Sin trilogy being a great example. I didn't set out writing it thinking I'm writing a young adult novel series. I was trying to do a dystopian treatise on how we really need to be better to each other as humans or things are going to be terrible. But I did have a couple of protagonists who were teenagers. And so as soon as I started querying anywhere, it was like, oh, this is YA. And I think they, for whatever reason, the publisher on the second book, it just says sci-fi dystopian on the back, even though the first book says YA sci-fi. I don't know why that is. But I do think that because there is a big market, if there's any way to sort of skew a book towards that, the industry trend is to do that. And the other good piece of that is, I don't think there's a lot of stigma around like adults reading YA. Right. So, YA with crossover appeal is what you hear a lot. And that's certainly, how the Sin series has been positioned, and 13 Jericho Lane as well, I'm sure is going to be marketed as a YA with crossover appeal because there is a teen protagonist and young ghosts. So we'll see. But yeah, if it gets more people reading of all ages, great. Although I was at the SCBWI, Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators, Midwest convention a couple weeks ago, and the agents and editors from Big 5 publishing houses who were on panels there were all actually saying that the two acquisition areas that they're most interested right now are middle grade and graphic novels. That like the middle grade market is now what's exploding. YA is not going anywhere, but because it's become oversaturated, everyone is oh yeah, my book's YA. Not as many people are writing for middle grade, and it's also this huge market. So acquisitions wise, if you're wondering, if we're a little late in NaNoWriMo, but if you want to dive in, go for an MG project. And graphic novels and telling stories not traditionally thought of as graphic novel stories. So like not necessarily superhero stuff, although I love that. But like there's been lots of Bible graphic novel stories and lots of memoir graphic novel and lots of, underrepresented voices graphic novels. And there's a lot of interest in that right now. I wish I could.
Thank you for bringing this to us. Middle grade. We're
Middle grade.
doing
Yeah.
it.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing it.
Touching on you mentioned the teen characters in the original Sin series. How did you develop? There's several sort of like main characters that are like doing all the things. I don't want to spoil it. Like doing all the things.
Yeah.
How did you develop such strong characters and like several of them at the same time and really intertwine them together?
Oh, thanks. Good question. I actually credit my playwriting background with a lot of that. I love ensemble shows where every actor that's on stage has something meaty, right? Like no one is, knight with spear number 4. Everyone is actually there for a reason. And I really had that in mind when I was sort of building this world, is any character that I put in this book, I want them to be there for a reason. I want them to be the sort of role that an actor would love to play. And so actually there are several characters that seem like minor characters in Original Sin that then we spend a lot more time with in Born in Sin, or a little more time with, and then they explode in Sin and Salvation. The idea being like, don't overlook the background. Don't overlook that person who you might just pass by in the hallway. They're going to wind up maybe saving the world. But yeah, I definitely credit writing plays and not believing, which you will hear a lot in the publishing industry, that you have to have single protagonist, a follow character whose arc is what you stick to. Otherwise, people won't relate to your book. Okay, but tell that to George R.R. Martin and Game of Thrones.
Another question I had, again, because there's a lot going on, but what do you think is most important to have? Really, really strong characters, mind-blowing plot twists and cliffhangers, or epic settings and world building?
Thanks for all the easy questions.
All of which you do.
Thank you. I always start with character and a big question. I'd say like those are the 2 ingredients for me. Even if it's not something that's overtly stated or asked, I have a big question that I'm sort of working with. And then who are the interesting characters, hopefully interesting, that get to like dive in and explore it. I would actually say that like epic world building is kind of my weakness for this, especially like this kind of story. I don't start with here's the landscape and the language and how they dress that's so different. Like those are the parts that I struggled with. And actually I was, it was my second year in the MFA program here at the W that I got the contract with Owl House for the Original Sin series. And I was able to workshop a couple of chapters when I was here for residency. And one of the comments that I got from one of my peers who's really into world building was like, you never tell us what they're wearing. I want to know more about like what things look like. So that part was actually the struggle for me. Like I had to go back in and be like, all right, what is their outfit? Like how are they dressed? Because I'm so caught up in character and what's going on in their, interior life and what are the big questions. So yeah, I'm much more about the cliffhangers and the plot twists and the characters that are making all that happen. And I really need help and to be pushed around what does it look like while that's happening? What is the backdrop to the big questions? What is the world that these characters are living in? That is my challenge.
Can you talk a bit more about your experience in the MFA program and sort of where you were at before and after and sort of just all of the...
Yeah. I was super excited. Shout out if Peppy Biddy happens to be watching this. He was sort of the first person who put a word in my ear when this program was going to be getting off the ground, I was sort of like half looking for maybe this is something I'd wanted to do. I already had a master's degree, and it was really difficult for me to justify like going back to graduate school again and in my 30s, and everything about this program. I mean, what got me in the door when I had my first conversation with Kendall Dunkelberg was that it would accommodate you having a life while you did the program, but would really push you to focus in and invest in yourself as a writer. And that's what I was looking to get out of it. I still struggled until very recently to say I'm a writer and not have imposter syndrome screaming in my ear, and no, you're not. There are real writers in the world. You write, but you're not a writer. That's a different thing. And I finally feel like I can say I'm a writer and not be waiting for someone to give me a condescending smile. And I credit the program with a lot of that because it was the first time that I really got to immerse myself in a consistent writer community with my peers and the core faculty, especially, that I got to interact with a lot over the course of my time in the program. And there's just something about making that commitment and saying, no, even though I have all of these other spinning plates, it matters enough to me that I want to put in the time and the expense and the dedication to earn this degree because I'm a writer and this is what I want to do. And much like, you know, doing NaNoWriMo for a month does not mean you're instantly going to have a book that's ready to publish. Doing an MFA does not instantly mean you're going to quit your day job, have a career, and now you're a writer. But it does help you sort of hone in on what you want to do in your writing career. It helps really seed for you the importance of a writing community and the feedback process, and knowing that critique partners, or CPs, as you'll see in a lot of writing forums, are like some of the most important allies that you can have. And I'm definitely still in touch with the folks that I was in the MFA program with, and we'll send first chapters to them and ask for feedback. And I'm really fortunate that I was able to take that time. And, you know, now I get to be an alum of the W, so that's cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a go-to person that you like to send your early drafts to?
Good question. I have several. I will say my husband, Yanni Doffin, is almost always my first reader, although he has yet to read 13 Jericho Lane, and I might wait till it's a little further down the road since I have another great and very dedicated mentor who's, you know, seeing me through this. But I will say it's been lovely, and I don't know, there's something that's always feels a little dangerous when you're asking the person that you are also married to give you brutally honest feedback about a piece of work. Much like you need to sometimes close your laptop and walk away, sometimes he will give me his brutally honest thoughts about whatever I have shared, and I'll be like, thank you. I'll talk to you tomorrow. But no, I mean, to have people that you really do trust and respect their opinions and know that they will tell you what is and isn't working is really important. So yeah, he's definitely traditionally been my first go-to, but depending now on what I'm writing, and thanks in large part to doing the MFA, I have several reader friends who I know, like, this is really their wheelhouse. They're going to be able to help me with X issue that they're really good at. So sometimes I'll send stuff along earlier to different people based on what I know their interests and strengths are.
Excellent. Can you tell us more about Pitch Wars and how that worked out for you and what that's going to end up with after it's over?
So Pitch Wars is a really cool concept. It's sort of like Cupcake Wars, but for writers. That was sort of where the name came from. I think it's in its maybe 7th-ish year. But basically, there's a 2-day window in September wherein you can apply. But you really heavily prepare before you apply during this very tight window. They have mentors who are established agented authors, and the mentors each post sort of their wish list and their skill set Here's the sort of stories that I'm interested in working on. Here's what I'm really good at: world building, character development, pacing. And I didn't get into pitch wars the first time that I applied. And I think that the reason I got in this year was twofold. I do think that the manuscript that I sent in was in a better place than when I tried a couple of years ago. But I also really, really paid attention to the mentor wish list and what it was that they were looking for, what they said their skill set was. You can apply to up to 4 mentors. And I made sure that anyone that I was applying to, it was because I was a really good fit. Not just I thought that they were cool and a great author and I loved their work, but what they said they were hoping to do as a mentor was something that I needed as a mentee, and that I could commit to having the sort of rapport that, you know, they were looking for. So you have this 2-day window to apply, and you have to have your full manuscript ready to go if you're asked for the full. But the initial application is like 10 pages or the first couple chapters, and your cover letter and basic pitch and why you think, you know, these mentors would be good for you. And they have thousands of people who apply. I think they had something like 4,000 this year for fewer than 100 spots. So
Wow.
it's very competitive.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And yeah, when you get in, then you work with your mentor and have some pretty tight turnarounds for deadlines and big revisions. And you really do have to be willing to dig in and make these huge changes. And then there is a big agent showcase in February, the first week of February. So that's when all of the pitches will go up, and there's a cadre of bigger house agents that will look at the work and see what happens from there. But it's great. And the community around it too. I've been trying to like ease off of Facebook, but I'm sort of back on mostly because there's a mentees group and reading about what everyone else is writing. And it's just a really diverse and dynamic group of mentees. In some ways, it's both incredibly exciting and also super discouraging to read some of this and be like, why are you all not like New York Times bestselling authors already? You're so good in the excerpts that they share there and the pitches for their books. But it drills down this idea again that having community around writing and having these external deadlines and adhering to them and demonstrating that you can do that is almost as important as what you're writing and who might read that. People want to work with someone who is going to deliver not just like great concepts, but here's the nitty gritty, I can get work done.
The writing, you seem like really tapped into the writing community, like not just for like just, you talked about NaNoWriMo, you talked about working with the MFA. Do you have any suggestions for people who are like looking to be more of a part of that? Like where are the places that they should look to first?
Yeah. I mean, obviously everyone should go to the W and get your MFA. Great experience. Nobody paid me to say that. But no, I think that there's lots of great ways to build writing community. The internet makes it a lot easier. There are a ton of down to hyper local, but also genre specific Facebook groups and Google groups. And you can sort of search, like if you know that you want to be writing historical verse novels, there's communities around that. But I will say, and it could be again because of my playwriting background and really liking being in the room with the other artists who are trying to work on the same sorts of things that you are, that just putting out a call, even over, Twitter or Facebook, of, hey, I'd love to start a writers group looking for like 3 to 5 people. If you're interested, let me know. On the playwriting side, I used to just call it my lasagna nights. Like when I had a draft that was ready to read, I had a go-to group of actor friends that I would put out the call and be like, all right, come over for lasagna, and then read my script aloud so I can hear it and know what I need to fix. And I think that a similar concept can sort of work for writing. I love that there's going to be this pie and writing, but that if you feed them, they will come. I guarantee if you put out on any social media platform, I'm going to make food. Do you want to come and write? Then even if you don't have direct friends who are writers that would be interested, they'll be like, oh, but my friend Amanda might be interested. I know that she's working on a writing project. And while the wider community is great, I would definitely recommend if you can have a core of like 3 to 5 people who are your go-tos. If it's local and you do want to get together in person, the fewer people, the easier to wrangle the schedules. But I do think that there is a little bit of a too many cooks risk when you have a really large writing group. I was once part of like a 12-person writers group in Jackson that would meet. And while sometimes the feedback was really valuable, just the time to read like comments from 12 people on each chapter of a book, you don't wind up doing it. But if you have 3 to 5 people, that's a nice sized group and everyone can sort of have attention paid to their work and you can process the comments without just feeling overwhelmed by that level of feedback.
Thank you.
I'm gonna ask for.
Does anyone have any questions, thoughts that they'd like to share with us on Zoom? Do you have any thoughts, questions you'd like to mention that we didn't get to touch on that you'd like to talk about?
Oh, I feel like we just had like such a good,
I know,
good conversation. I haven't like let my mind wander far enough to what else we might.
Well, I have a question for you that I'm so intrigued by, which is the writer's environment. What does your environment look like when you sit down to start writing? Do you longhand, computer, by yourself, lots of music? What do you do?
So this is a little bit cliche, but I'm definitely a coffee shop writer. Like my ideal writing day is to get up, go out on my own, get a really like nice, decadent, don't think about how many calories are in it mocha, and just hole up in a corner where there's plenty of background noise that I don't have to pay attention to, and just sit there and write on a computer. I will say for Original Sin, since there's a lot to keep track of, I would sometimes pull out a notebook and just like make lists and charts and would need those visuals. But for the most part, I don't like to type what I've written. I do that a lot for day job. I'm in meetings and I have to take notes and then transcribe them later sometimes. So when I'm writing, I really like to be on the screen where the words are going to live, working on it there. And yeah, coffee shop, mocha, laptop. That's my formula.
That's a good one. I really am fascinated by all the different ways people are writing. And also, we've had so many different kinds of people come and visit with us during NaNoWriMo and talk about their process and what does it look like, and the idea of a plotter versus somebody
a pantser.
And where do you come down on the plotter pantser?
I really love, first of all, the plotter pantser terminology.
Strange.
Which it was like when I learned the phrases a couple years ago, then all of a sudden they were everywhere. Like you hear a word and all of a sudden everyone else is learning it. It's just in the zeitgeist. So I will say that I am a plotter who really envies and admires pantsers. Like, I wish that I could just sit down and let's see where it goes today. And I used to occasionally do that. And with plays, I still sometimes can do that because I feel like it's a language I'm more fluent in. And so sometimes I can just like have sort of an idea and sit down and start writing. But with a novel, the only way for my mind to sort of make it into something I can do and not something totally overwhelming is to plot out at least sort of what the big arc is. My character wants this, here's the obstacle, what's going to happen. And then often I'll like pick at a chapter or two and then realize like, no, I need to go through and be like, at least by act, if not by chapter, like this is what happens in act 1, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, which also helps with the blank screen. Like if you put in the time to do that first, I always have, when I scroll down after finishing a chapter, there's the bullet point for my next chapter. And that might change, and I might have something happen in the actual writing process that totally derails the order of events or what might originally have been happening next. But for me, at least, it's just it's sort of an anchor that holds me there. And so I'm not just like floating away into this like endless sea of possibility with writing.
Love it. Do you have anything you'd like to announce or share with us about what's next or what's coming up?
Yeah, well, definitely for anyone on social media, please feel free to follow, because especially with the Pitch Wars process, I am doing a lot more posting than usual. So on Instagram, it's just my name, Beth Kander. On Twitter, it's by Beth Kander, which is also my Facebook. But you'll be able to see a lot of updates and hopefully what will be happening next with 13 Jericho Lane, I have a couple more stops on the book tour for Born in Sin, and some of those might also have readings that will be on Zoom and elsewhere, and I try to post those links when they are there. I just turned in Sin and Salvation to my first go-to reader, who is doing her round of edits before I turn it back into the editor at the publishing house. So take that, George R.R. Martin. I did finish my series. And so that'll be coming out next year. And then I have a few playwriting things in the works. So
Fun.
yeah, stay tuned.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank y'all. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me.